So thanks for joining us this morning. This is the webinar we're doing on the Self-Generation Incentive Program being offered by the CPUC for energy storage projects on tribal lands in California. And I'll do some brief introductions, but here's the agenda. We'll do introductions. We'll go over and do some overview and benefits of energy storage systems for homes and facilities on tribal lands, provide a high-level overview of the CPUC Self-Generation Incentive Program, or SGIP for short, discuss some recent SGIP program changes, talk about the non-residential opportunities for government facilities and businesses, discuss the residential opportunities on tribal lands, and discuss some of the rebate initiatives that we're working on right now to be able to bring these projects to tribes throughout the state. So I don't have everybody on here. So I'm Josh Simmons with Prosper Sustainably. I've been working with tribes now since a really long time, I guess. I first started in '99, but I was the former director of the San Ynez Chumash Environmental Office. And I've recently gotten connected with Sean, who I actually knew back from some of my work with the Chumash. They did some solar installations with a former company that he was with. And so Sean Jacobson is with Swell Energy. He's the VP of Operations. I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more and his team. We also have Shasta Gaughan, the Environmental Director for the Paula Band of Mission Indians, who will be joining us and sharing some of her experiences, as well as John Flores, the Environmental Director for San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians, will be joining us to share his experience in working with us and pursuing some of these projects. Sean, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself and your team? I think we have Mark on here as well to talk about the commercial opportunities.
Yeah, good morning. Sean Jacobson here with Swell Energy, and yeah, excited to be here to spread the information of the programs, the SGIP statewide programs that are available to tribal tribes statewide. And I have on the call is Mark Thulke, who is head of our commercial division. We are working to bring residential energy storage to both residential homes to provide energy backup and some savings opportunities, as well as to qualified commercial properties to provide resiliency during power outages to keep facilities up and running. So excited to be here again and looking forward to sharing a little bit more about some of the details as we go through the presentation.
Yeah, so I'm going to step back for another moment too and just talk about what we've been doing. So Prosper Sustainably and Swell have been working with 3 tribes so far on pursuing these SGIP opportunities for battery storage projects. The Paula with Shasta on the line, John with the the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians, and also the Rincon Band of Luis Sueño Indians as well. And so far, in working with Swell, and actually Swell and I've worked with a few other battery installers as well on a few different projects. We've gotten in, I believe, over $6 million worth of rebate applications so far, most of which have already been approved and are going to be proceeding to the implementation phase relatively soon. We got all of those applications in on the launch day of this program, which was May 12th. And our goal was to kind of work with these tribes who are already existing clients of mine to kind of figure out how to best serve tribes. This opportunity is available across the state to non-tribal entities as well. And there's a lot of money, but it's limited, and it seems to be going really fast. And so we are really trying to systematically bring these opportunities to tribal communities for as many homes and facilities as possible to ensure that tribes get as much of this money as possible before it runs out. And we are now on the verge of rolling out our statewide program, where we're reaching out across the state to tribes, particularly in high fire threat districts or those experiencing PSPS outages. And we'll get into more details about eligibility in a moment.
Great.
And Shasta, do you want to introduce yourself? I guess I have you on the line too.
Yes, hi. My name is Shasta Gaughan. I am the environmental director for the Paula Band of Mission Indians. I've worked with Josh for a long time on many different projects and recently started working with Sean and his team on this rebate opportunity. And it's a very exciting opportunity and something that it's a little hard for some of our leadership folks to believe. Like, is this really just free? Is it really that simple? It really is free. I wouldn't say it's exactly simple, but it's completely worth it to go through the process. So I'm here to talk about what we've done so far and answer any questions. Thank you.
Shasta. Okay, so first we're going to discuss why you may want to consider having a battery energy storage system. And so here's just, kind of I would say the simplest, most straightforward project of a Tesla Powerwall system attached to a home, and it's providing backup power. So that's, I think the main thing that these battery systems are providing. And Swell installs all sorts of batteries, but they primarily do Tesla batteries, Tesla Powerwalls and Power Packs, which are, we believe, the leading technology on the market right now. There are other battery vendors out there that are developing technology, just not quite as far along as Tesla is. But first and foremost is maintaining power during outages. So everybody across the state, or not everybody, but a lot of people across the state are experiencing these public safety power shutoff events where power may be out for hours or even days, and I think in Northern California, maybe even approaching weeks in some cases. And so the CPUC has had this rebate program available for several years now, but it has not been as, I guess, lucrative or it's not been as well incentivized to target these types of projects. And so this is a fairly recent development here, but they're rolling this out right now to get batteries installed at the locations that are experiencing these PSPS outages or are experiencing outages due to wildfires and other storm events, but primarily those who are at risk with the high fire threat districts and the public safety shutoffs. They're trying to get them have that kind of resilience so that when the power goes out, they can continue to operate homes and critical facilities. So a battery energy storage system is going to allow you to maintain power at your home or facility when the power goes out. And that's how long you're going to have power is going to depend upon the battery size, what the level of charge is when the power goes out, and your electric usage when the power does go out. So, if you are running your HVAC system, your air conditioning, then your battery is going to drain a lot faster than if you are, turning that off and running a minimal amount of appliances. So sorry, I just muted you, Sean, just because I was getting a little feedback, or at least one version of Sean. So, that's if you have just a battery system. And so I want to make it very clear from the beginning that this rebate is just for a battery system. There's been several times people have asked us, like, whether you need solar to proceed with this type of project, and you do not. It is an option. You can pair these battery systems with solar, and that's going to allow you to have ongoing energy. Normally, your solar is going to shut off when the grid goes out because the solar energy has nowhere to go. But with a battery, the solar will remain on, and it'll continue to charge the battery and allow you to have that much more power during the outage. But to be crystal clear, you do not need solar. These batteries will be installed solar ready, and if you have solar, they will be connected to that solar. But you do not need solar in order to proceed with one of these projects and get one of these rebates. So that's the primary benefit, is maintaining power during outages. Another benefit that many projects will also see is money savings on their electrical bills. These batteries are going to function even when the system is on the grid. So the power is on. The batteries do need to be grid tied, meaning that you do need to connect them to utility infrastructure. And depending on your rate that you have and your usage patterns, you first of all may be able to shift your usage from those higher peak times where you're paying more money to your lower peak times. So what the battery will do is it'll charge up during the off-peak hours where energy costs are lower, and then during the on-peak hours, the battery will discharge, and instead of pulling energy from the grid, you'll pull energy from the battery, meaning you'll be paying a lower cost per kilowatt hour. So that's one way of realizing energy savings. Another way is to, if you have a rate schedule that has demand charges, so let's say you have demand charges and you have an air conditioning system or an HVAC system, and you turn that AC on, usually there's a spike in your energy usage, and how the extent of that spike, how large that spike is over a given billing cycle, you pay an additional charge based on how large that spike is. Well, instead of having that energy be pulled from the grid and increasing that spike and increasing your bill associated with your demand charge, you can instead have your load pull from the battery, and so that the grid does not see as large of a spike, meaning you're going to reduce your demand charges and pay less money on your electrical bill. So again, these depend on your usage patterns and your utility rate schedule. And if you are proceeding with Swell or any company with this, they should be conducting an analysis to identify what the potential cost savings are. So you ensure there are going to be some cost savings, and you'll have an understanding of what they may look like. So this represents that time of use pricing that I was talking about. So, I think a pretty typical pattern is the top graph right here. Those numbers aren't necessarily accurate. They're just an example. I think that was from an older SDG&E image that I pulled from the internet. So the super off-peak period typically is going to be from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., and that's where you're going to be paying the least amount of money for energy. There'll be an off-peak period, which now is from 6 a.m., I believe, until 4 p.m. And then the on-peak period is going to be 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then again, after 9 p.m., it goes back into an off-peak period. So the battery is going to charge during these super off-peak or off-peak periods, and then it's going to discharge during the on-peak period, so that you're effectively paying the super off-peak and off-peak pricing during the on-peak periods. And the other benefit is if you have solar connected to it, then you'll be charging the battery with solar, which typically is going to be during these off-peak periods, because when it usually hits 4 p.m., your solar is not really producing as much. And then you'll be able to use that solar energy through the battery during these on-peak periods, offsetting those higher peak pricing. Sean, do you want to share anything more about benefits before I move on to the CPUC, the recent changes?
Just to mention, the work we've done for tribes so far has been mostly in San Diego, but on a statewide basis, there are various rate schedules that have various compelling arguments on the time of use. For residential, absolutely, and then also on commercial, we do see demand charge mitigation, which is reducing that demand spike, being a fairly large portion of savings. So in addition to the actual install, in most cases being free, there is an ongoing savings element to these projects, which is pretty exciting. And then additionally to that is the time of use arbitrage, which is relevant for both, again, residential and commercial. So it does apply to all the small commercial accounts as well. And just want to mention that outside of savings, that this is time of use is also indicative of when we're using fossil fuel energy that causes greenhouse gas emissions. And so in most cases, we also have to kind of align that energy, the battery, how it charges and how it discharges, to also ensure that we're contributing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that does line up one-to-one in most cases with time of use arbitrage. So some additional environmental benefits there as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the target audience here, at least my connections, were all in the environmental world. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other air emissions is a co-benefit of proceeding with a battery system in most cases.
Great.
All right, so I mentioned CPUC, and just for those of you who may not know, CPUC is the California Public Utilities Commission, and I've provided their SGIP link here. They've been updating it more recently, so you can get more information on the program there. The CPUC authorized the self-generation incentive program, and they allocate the funding toward it. They make the decisions on how the program is kind of the framework, the overall rules, and how procedures for the program. But the actual administration of the rebate program is done by utilities or the utilities proxies. So PG&E and Southern California Edison, I think maybe even Southern California Gas Company, administer SGIP directly on their own, whereas SDG&E has the Center for Sustainable Energy administering it on their behalf. So depending on which territory you're in, you would work with that utility, or in the case of SDG&E, Center for Sustainable Energy. But you would start at the Self-Generation Incentive Program portal. That's where you submit your applications at. So that's that link, selfgen.ca.com. And so you'd go there, and then it would be those local utilities that are going to be the ones that reviewing and administering your application and issuing the rebate funds per the guidance and framework and rules that have been placed down by the CPUC. So I do want to point out too that this rebate is only available to those that are paying into the public purpose programs, which I think, you know, if you're in an IOU territory, so an IOU meaning an investor-owned utility, PG&E, Southern California Edison, SDG&E, or SoCal Gas, you actually have to be paying into those public purpose programs in order to be eligible for this. I'm not entirely clear. It's possible that you may have a utility that still is eligible if your utility is actually receiving energy from one of the IOUs, and through them you're paying in the public purpose program. So I kind of need to, we would need to look at that on a case-by-case basis. So if you are an IOU territory already, one of those 4 IOUs already mentioned, then you should be perfectly fine. If you're not, then just reach out to us, let us know who you're working with, and we can dig a bit further and see whether or not you're actually eligible for it. The SGIP program launched in 2011, so it's been around for a little while, and it's just evolved over time where they've changed different categories and changed incentive amounts. And so what we're really talking about is some very recent changes that have made these projects very lucrative for tribal communities. So the rebates are for emerging energy storage and generation projects. And our focus here is primarily, is exclusively on energy storage projects. As I mentioned, this rebate is funded by IOU ratepayers there's a public purpose programs surcharge on bills that are being used to pay for these and other programs. And again, I already mentioned this as well, that the rebates are only available to the fund contributors, which typically are just going to be the IOU customers, but there may be circumstances which you are not in an IOU territory, but your utility works with the IOU and pays into this fund. All right, so the changes that we're now going to be talking about that are making these projects essentially free for tribal communities was first made on September 12, 2019, where the CPUC issued a decision that did a few different things, and there's been subsequent decisions that have fleshed out the decision, provided more parameters and guidance, and even some of these decisions are still ongoing and will continue to be ongoing as the program gets implemented and the administrators identify areas that need to be clarified, and as some of the parties to these proceedings identify issues that need to be resolved by the CPUC. And we'll talk about some of those pending decisions today. So the first thing that happened, which unfortunately this particular category got used up on day one, they created this equity budget category. Well, there was an equity budget category before. What they did for the equity budget category, and that's for projects that are typically in low income and disadvantaged community areas, Before they used to be, I would say 35 cents per watt hour, or they were much lower. It wasn't, so what they did is they increased the incentive for these equity projects to 85 cents per watt hour, meaning any project that's in a disadvantaged community that meets other criteria would qualify for this 85 cents per watt hour budget. And they did that because they found that nobody was using the equity budget. These equity projects are in places where there's less money available for these types of projects, and so it just wasn't being used. So they wanted to get that money moving, get those projects installed in areas of need. And when they launched on May 12th, at least the non-residential side, this money actually in this category got used up right away. So there currently is no more money in just the standard equity category. What they also did though is they created an equity resilience budget category. So equity projects that are in high fire threat districts that also are facilities of certain types or homes that meet certain qualifications are receiving an additional 15 cents on top of the 85 cents per watt hour. So effectively $1 per watt hour rebate. And this equity resiliency budget is significantly larger than the equity budget rebate budget, and there was hundreds of millions of dollars in there, and there still is, but it's moving fairly quickly. But this is really what we're focusing on here, is that tribal projects that are eligible under the equity resilience category, and that are going to be in high fire threat districts or facilities that have been subject to facilities or homes that have been subject to 2 or more PSPS outages, so long as they meet the other qualifications, are going to qualify for the $1 per watt hour rebate. And I need to update some of these maps. I'm not sure if this map right here is, they recently, CPUC updated the map to also show utility circuits that are being subject to 2 or more PSPS outages, and I'll show you that map, and I'll pull it over right now. So you can go on the CPUC website and pull up this map right now. That's going to show you right here. The purple is the high fire threat districts that are going to be eligible, and then on top of that, the areas that are being subject to 2 or more public safety power shutoffs. And so what you can do is you can just simply put in your address, and then once you pop in your address, it's going to zoom into that area and show you whether or not that area is eligible. So as I mentioned, I used to work for the San Ynez Chumash, and I was looking them up the other day. So I'm going to put in their tribal government center and see whether or not they're eligible. So it pops up, and the area, at least where this is doesn't have any color. So that means it's not in one ineligible territory. So if I zoom out a little bit more, though, I see that unfortunately, while they're not eligible, they're surrounded by a whole bunch of areas that would be eligible. I know that the reservation itself is kind of wraps around this body of water right here. So unfortunately, none of it's within these areas. But most of California tribal lands, I would say, or at least a significant portion of California tribal lands, are in these high fire threat districts. So Paula is in one. Chef, what's the address for the administration building?
What is the address?
Yeah.
It is 12196 Paula Mission Road.
Okay, so if we punch in Paula's address, we can see they're smack dab in the middle of a high fire threat district. We zoom out further. Unfortunately, these maps don't have reservation boundaries, so you need to kind of cross-reference it. But clearly, all of Paula is within a high fire threat district. Same thing with Rincon, same thing with San Pasqual. So that's why they were all really good candidates for proceeding and pursuing these rebates. And and that's why there's $6 million worth of rebate applications for homes and facilities on at these 3 reservations. So the other unique aspect of this new ruling is that with other categories before, the quote general categories, there was step down. So as the budget got used, the rebate would be reduced to lower amounts per watt hour. In this case, the $1 per watt hour for the equity resilience budget is staying at $1 until the entire budget is exhausted. So as I already mentioned, that equity resilience budget significantly increased. I think we're in the order of total $500 or $600 million total with the past money and the future money. But as I mentioned, it's moving pretty quickly. So another significant change to the SGIP program was that the CPUC decided to categorize all of California Indian lands as disadvantaged communities. Typically, the state defines disadvantaged communities using Cal EnviroScreen, and if you've applied for state funding in other areas and sought that was focused on that maybe either focused on disadvantaged communities or provided additional incentive or a certain category for disadvantaged communities, a lot of times tribes do not actually qualify based on Cal EnviroScreen, partially because it's determined by pollution levels in the area, and a lot of tribes are rural, and even though they're remote and certainly disadvantaged historically and currently, they're due to their rural nature, they usually do not have as high of levels of pollution. And I think they're also associated with the census tract information, and sometimes that census tract information is incomplete for tribes, so it doesn't pick them up. So CPUC decided for the SGIP program that they were just going to say that all California Indian lands, which are going to be federally recognized Indian lands, so federally recognized trust lands and privately held in holdings that are owned by a tribe or at least one tribal member, are going to be categorized as disadvantaged communities for this purpose. And I'll come back to that in a moment. There's additional eligibility requirements for both residential and non-residential in order to determine whether a home or facility is going to qualify. That was really significant that we first learned about last fall, and have been working hard to kind of set this up and roll this out for tribal communities who now are in prime position relative to the other non-tribal communities out there to take advantage of this funding for these types of projects. Sean, do you want to add anything else about the SGIP program CPUC changes before I proceed to non-residential opportunities?
No, I think it's good that we've gotten some clarity on how we're going to move forward, so we can just be really explicit with consulting and offering this option to residents. I do think it's important to know that some customers may still want, or some of your residents may still want to proceed with residential energy storage regardless of the full free rebate, because there is still a general market category rebate available too. So to the extent that these solutions do not come free always, we are very much in support of providing systems to those others that may have to pay themselves or figure out some financing. We have been discussing some group discount programs for tribal residents that could be kind of a per tribe basis, and again, there are still some pretty good rebates available outside of this once in a lifetime free battery rebate program. So
yeah, that's good addition. So even if you don't qualify specifically, it doesn't mean that you don't have any options or any opportunities. You may still be able to get discounted, substantially discounted battery systems if that's something that's of interest for at homes or government facilities or businesses. So I'm going to step back again to kind of talk about how this all evolved too before we get into the specifics of the non-residential and then the residential specific requirements and opportunities and what the work we've done with the 3 tribes so far, and in a discussion with a few other tribes at this time as well. I'm proceeding with. So I've Prosper Sustainably provides environmental sustainability, climate, energy consulting services for tribes throughout the country, but primarily in California. And been working in the energy space for a while now. I first started kind of cutting my teeth with tribal energy projects with the Chumash, and got a few solar installations up going in there, and just was continuing to investigate and pursue these types of projects. And then as I started Prosper Sustainably, been doing more and more energy related projects, and more recently in the last few years, been getting heavily into microgrid projects and have worked with Paula, San Pasquale, and Rincon in particular in getting microgrid related project funding for both government and commercial projects. Some fairly small and some very large. And so have had a lot of success in getting grant funding through the DOE and the CPUC over the past several years. Received I think total awards of probably $15 to $20 million for these types of projects. Typically Prosper Sustainably is vendor neutral. We advocate, we work for tribes directly. We advocate for tribes. We serve as owners representatives. We serve as project managers. We run procurements for them on these types of projects, in addition to getting grants for them to proceed with these projects. And we have projects going on right now with both Rincon and San Pasquale, I think 4 different microgrid projects that are funded by federal and state grants. When this opportunity came about, because it's really free for tribes and tribes, it's different than a grant where, I get paid by tribes to write grants for them and we then support them in implementing them. It's kind of a harder sell to go to tribes and ask them to get support to get paid to go out there and pursue these rebate opportunities. Swell had reached out to me, Sean in particular. I mentioned Sean worked with me when I was with the San Ynez Chumash. The company he worked for installed the solar at the the administration building and health clinic there, and they did a few residential installations on the reservation as well. And I just enjoyed working with Sean, and then Sean has kind of worked for various companies since then, and Sean was involved in kind of the founding and creation of Swell Energy. And so, Swell Energy seemed like a good natural fit to proceed with this, knowing that this is going to be, probably a once in a lifetime type thing, knowing the money is going to probably move very fast, and knowing we need to work with a company that focuses and understands batteries. Most of the companies out there that are working on these types of projects are solar companies, and they certainly do batteries. A lot of them though are only offering these rebates if you proceed with a solar PV system. And I believe I've talked with representatives from Sunrun and others, and that's basically what they've told me. That may have changed. That may not be the case. On these opportunities, you can work with any company that you want. You can take this information and go out there and talk to others as well. I chose to work with Swell because they focus on batteries. They do solar as well, but their exclusive focus has been on batteries. They have, I think, Sean, you said over 800 residential installations in California, and they have a rapidly growing commercial division as well. Sean's from the commercial space. Sean's got folks on his team that are from the commercial space that have done large storage and microgrid related projects. And so for me, it just made the most sense to work with a company that had some tribal experience and was really a leader in the exclusively battery energy storage space, rather than seeking to work with a solar company. And due to Sean and I's prior relationship, being able to roll this out quicker, and there being some level of kind of trust and credibility there. That's part of what I feel like I bring to tribal communities, is that I really, I make sure that I'm doing a good job of vetting the various vendors that they're considering for these types of, solar or microgrid projects. And so that's, how this relationship developed. And then we first went to work with the tribes that I already had relationships with. So I work for San Pasquale, Rincon, and Paula separately on other projects, but Prosper is paid by Swell to support them in rolling out the tribal initiatives, and now in rolling out the statewide initiative. So just give you a little bit of context about, full disclosure, and just make it clear that, we're presenting this opportunity. I'm partnering with Swell, and certainly think that Swell is going to be a great company to work with, and I'll be here to support those projects and have a lot of experience in this space. And we have Shasta and others to be able to share their experiences and show that, to demonstrate our credibility. But you are, more than welcome to take this information and seek other opportunities, seek to work with others as well, if that's something that you either want to or need to do in order to better understand these opportunities. All right, so, after that, I want to now kind of discuss first the non-residential SGIP rebate opportunity. So I talked about the $1 per watt hour rebate of energy storage, and that is for specific facilities. This is a summary here. It's not completely verbatim, although it's pretty close to it. Police stations, fire stations. Police stations would include, I would say, public safety departments. So most tribes have public safety departments as maybe instead of quote unquote police stations that should qualify. And then there's this, the third one on here is a very, very broad category, emergency response providers, and they provide examples of what that means. So, if you can fit a particular facility that houses a quote emergency response provider in here, then you could be eligible. With Rincon, in particular, and I think even San Pasquale, and actually maybe Paul as well, they all have like general services departments that do provide services during emergencies. They're the ones that are going out there and fixing things. They're doing the earthworks, and they may be supporting the fire department and doing fire breaks, or they're responding during these disasters to get infrastructure back up and running when it goes down. So we were able to submit applications for those as emergency response providers. So definitely you want to think creatively. Emergency operation centers is another category, and so a lot of times your tribal hall or tribal government center might be an emergency operations center or could be designated as one. There's 911 call centers, medical facilities, and broadly anything that can be categorized as a medical facility is going to qualify under this category. There's nursing homes, blood banks, healthcare facilities, and then gas, electric, water, wastewater, or flood control facilities. And that's fairly broad. So any systems that you have, or even I think departments that are providing services, water, wastewater, flood control related, or electric or gas services should qualify. I don't think jails or prisons are probably going to be something relevant to many tribes. IOU designated PSPS assistance centers. So if you work with your IOU to get a facility designated as a place where people can go during a PSPS outage, that can work. With Rincon, we were able to designate one facility as a cooling center. And so, the tribe, as far as I can tell, there's no specific certification. The tribe can just designate an area as a cooling center. That's a place where people can go during high heat days to get out of the heat and cool down. So homeless shelters, grocery and corner stores, that's markets and supermarkets. So grocery and corner stores, markets and supermarkets is a pretty big opportunity for tribes, particularly with those with gas stations and C-stores. A convenience store, fits under the category of market. So, if you have one of those, that would be eligible. And then, they'll kind of last to food banks and independent living centers. So if you have a facility that, can be either clearly is within one of these types of facilities or arguably, then it's worth submitting an application for it if it's something you need backup power or want backup power for, and or just cost savings. As I mentioned, it may be something where it may not be important for you to stay online, but these systems are going to probably save you money on electric bill through energy arbitrage or reducing your demand charges. So these facilities must be located in or serving lands that are subject to high fire threat. So Sean, actually, can these facilities, do they have to be in a high fire threat district, or can they just be serving a high fire threat district? I think my original interpretation was it can just be serving it, meaning that if you have community.
Yeah, they have to be in a high fire zone or to PSPS. That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I'll modify that. So facilities must be located in the high fire threat district as shown in that map, or subject to the PSPS, 2 PSPS events. And, that's represented by this orange on this map, where they're showing circuits that they're finding that have been already subject to 2 PSPS events. If you pull up this map and if there's an area, you're in an area that you've had 2 or more outages and it's not showing up, then you can contact your utility rep and they can give you, they have to give you a log of your PSPS outages or your outages. So, it may be that, this map is not 100% accurate, and maybe you've experienced 2 or more, and it's like 2 or more, since the PSPS events have been starting, which has been, a few years now. So, that's worth checking into if you feel like you've experienced 2 or more PSPS outages and it's not showing up for you on this map as that being the case.
And just one thing to add, Josh, which is PSPS outages are a very specific type of outage where they're turning power off prior to like during a wind event or a very dry plus wind event scenario. And so the way that they interpret these outages is actually directly to that type of an outage. And so you and your facilities may have experienced a couple outages, but it could be that they were doing maintenance upgrades, or it could have even been like just a wildfire turnoff, which it's a little ambiguous. So I would just encourage, to Josh's point, if you have experienced outages and you're not showing up on the map, it is important to reach out to the utility to get really clear about what types of outages you've had and what those qualifiers are. And it's very likely that this map won't be completely up to date, especially as we enter into high fire season. We may actually see this map getting modified pretty frequently. So if you haven't had those outages and all of a sudden you do experience an outage, you might go from unqualified to qualified very quickly. So we'll keep everyone posted, and especially any tribes that do partner with us. That's a big part of what we do, is to track this, and provide updates as things change.
Yeah, and so thanks, Sean. Just kind of give some more concrete examples. At Paula, we've submitted applications for. You have your tribal government center. I believe we submitted it for some wells, your fire station, wastewater treatment plant. There's the public safety department offices. I think we submitted it. Shasta, do you recall if it's been submitted for general services?
I believe so, but I'm actually at my home computer, so I can't check.
That's all right. Sean probably maybe know better. But these are just examples of things we considered, and if it seemed to align, it's either all these things would have qualified, and then Swell did the analysis to see whether it made economic sense to do so. And I believe most of the, if not all of the ones we're mentioning right now, did. The utilities department has its own building as well, so that was also a facility that was included that we submitted an application for as well. I think we also did submit one for the Paula mini marts. I think we had that on our radar. That one was a little tricky because it was on a casino meter, but that was certainly something that would have qualified as well. Sean, can you recall any other Paula related facilities?
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I mean, we had quite a few. I'd have to go back in, but
yeah. So
it's a mix of all of them. Yeah, I mean, it's the water facilities, the administration buildings, which there's a few in the equity side, but a lot of them are also kind of designated as cooling centers or emergency response providers. So there's some flexibility there, but they are looking at the the critical type facilities that can really keep a community alive and well during these outages and fires.
Yeah, and Sampa Squall, we did, when we already, separately from Swell, we had funding for a microgrid project that's in process and just beginning the construction phase right now, that included the government building, tribal hall, public safety department, fire station, education buildings as emergency shelters, and the wastewater treatment plant, all is actually a single microgrid. There's also the environmental department, public works department. I think there may have been some other facilities for Sampa Squall. At Rincon, many of the same facilities, fire, water pumps. I think we looked at a communications tower as an emergency response provider as well. I think, I can't remember now whether we included it. It may have been the usage was too low to justify the battery system. They have their gas station and C-store wastewater treatment plants. In that case too, we actually incorporated the casino itself has some emergency functions, and so an application has been submitted on behalf of the casino, pretty significantly sized application for backup power there as an emergency operation. Well, actually, I believe as a shelter and as a cooling center, and also as maybe a tertiary or at least secondary or tertiary emergency operations center as well. So there's lots of opportunities for tribal government facilities and businesses. Just to clarify too, the facility itself does not actually have to be owned by the tribe. Certainly, we are reaching out to tribes directly, and we're probably, talking about all tribally owned facilities. But another example of Rincon that we didn't necessarily pursue just quite yet is the Indian Health Council facilities, which are not owned by the tribe. They serve a tribal consortium in San Diego and Southern California. And that one would definitely qualify under the either medical facilities or healthcare facilities for this rebate as well. And that, so just to clarify, it doesn't have to be owned by the tribe. All right, Sean, you want to add anything else on the non-residential side?
No, I think we're good.
Actually, I think before we transition to the residential, let's briefly talk. I don't think I have the slides for it specifically about, if you are looking to proceed with this. We had a conversation with one tribe yesterday about, talking through what's the process look like, or what are some of the first steps in moving forward with this, and having a call and discussing these things. Identifying these facilities is definitely a key first step. What we've had most of the tribes do, actually all the tribes we've worked with so far, typically we found that the tribes will have a list of accounts that also hopefully describe which facility that a particular utility account or meter is associated with. And from there, then the swell team and I can review that and identify which ones look like they may be eligible. And then, when we kind of triage that list, identify which ones that look like they could be eligible for the rebate, we request the data for those. So the billing data, an actual bill, and then we need usage data. It's called interval data. There should be 15-minute interval data that shows the usage for every 15 minutes. The latest 12 months of interval data is what we need, and then Swell will take that and they'll analyze it using a program called Energy Toolbase to determine what the project looks like, what the cost savings will look like. They identify what the cost would be associated with that, and what the rebate would be. So they'll run a preliminary analysis to identify whether or not it is actually a good candidate for this program, whether or not it'll be 100% offset by the rebates. And in that case, if it is, then they'll come back to the tribe and say, this is what, this facility looks like it's going to be 100% offset by the rebate, so it's essentially going to be free to you. And these are the facilities that didn't qualify, but if you want to consider these still, this maybe would be what the difference would be. And we found that the vast majority of these facilities are looking like 100% offset, so entirely free. And then from there, if possible, the Swell is trying to get out there and look at the facilities. So something that impacts the cost too is what is the electrical infrastructure there? Do you need significant upgrades? This project involves significant upgrades, but is there something unusual going on that's going to be very costly to address, or it's going to require some additional infrastructure beyond what's typical for these projects? And they want to go out there and check that beforehand if they can get out there as soon as possible after that, and verify, kind of ground truth their cost estimates on it before they submit the application. And then there's certainly more kind of documentation and steps after that, which we can go through with any tribe individually when we get to that point. But just so you know, kind of what are the key first steps, getting that energy data, getting access to it. There's a couple different ways you can do so, but that's a critical step that can take a little bit of time. And if you have access to your accounts, your utility account for all of them, and can pull it yourself, great. If you can provide access to green button data through something like utility API or otherwise, that's an option too. If you're having difficulty getting access to the accounts through a portal and don't have a portal set up, but you have the account and meter numbers, then we can also get an authorization signed by the tribe to allow Swell to request that data directly from the utility on the tribe's behalf to run that analysis, and that being the key first step. And then it's ultimately up to the tribe to decide, which facilities they want to proceed with or not, once they get that analysis back from Swell or whoever they work with on these types of projects. Sean, do you want to add anything else to this before we?
No,
move
I
on?
think, yeah, just to mention, I mean, thanks for the overview. We certainly have some for any governments that are interested in looking at next steps, some documentation we can provide that kind of lays all that out there. I think, just making it as simple as possible. We're dealing with a lot of data and going into portals like with the utilities to download this. So we have some resources available to make it easier, and we can provide Dropbox folders and whatever makes sense to be able to provide us with this information to be able to kind of do our analysis and get everything moving forward. So yeah, just want to mention that. And as complicated as it sounds, and Shasta mentioned, it's got some parts and pieces to get these off the ground, but it is worth it because they're the long-term substantial savings that you can get for facilities, but also kind of limited time nature. Encourage you to put in the time to get the data, and we're here to help in every way we can as well.
Yeah, and it was I think Shasta, you said it was a little complicated, and you had a bit of an advantage over probably most folks because Paul was already a client of mine and doing a lot of energy planning related work. I already had access to all the SDG&E accounts. It's the same thing with Sampa Squall and Rincon, where I know where that data is and know how to easily access and pull it. So I think Shasta, how long would you say it took us to kind of get through and get the applications in? I mean, we probably did it in a matter of a few days, right?
Yeah, the application process didn't take very long at all. And, like you said, we had access to some of those materials already, but it's just a matter of pulling those accounts or getting the SDG&E access. And so it's not that it's hard. It can be slightly time consuming if you haven't done it already, but it's not so time consuming that it's not worth it.
Yeah. And it's just, I think that, I mean, I've worked with I was with the Chumash for a while, and then I've worked with several tribes on various projects too. And it's just, I think it just depends on each individual tribe, what their circumstances are, of how easy it is to access this data, who has access to it. But like I said, we have those workarounds too, where if it's difficult for you to get access to the portal or the portal's not set up, then doing the authorization may be the path of least resistance, and that actually puts the onus entirely on Swell. They're the ones doing all the legwork on actually gathering the data and working with SDG and get it, or whatever utility, and actually getting it. Okay, so only have a few more minutes here. The residential opportunities, I want to discuss those as well. In some cases, it's a little more complex. Some cases, it's a little simpler. This has been a bit of a moving target. Our original interpretation of the language of the decision from back last September was that all homes and all reservations were going to be eligible, and the language reflected that, but there was some kind of conflicting language and some conflicting interpretation. So we had worked with the CPUC to seek clarification on that, and they just earlier this week issued a proposed decision to provide that clarity. So, these slides right now reflect their proposed decision, which is not final, so it could certainly change. But I think we kind of essentially know what the parameters are. It just may be that there may be a little bit of changes within those parameters, and I'll point out where that is the case. So homes, first of all, a home with an electric pump for drinking water, or that's providing water for it, is going to be, if it's in a high fire threat district or subject to 2 or more PSPS outages, it's going to be eligible for the $1 per watt rebate, regardless of the income of the people living in the home. So that's a pretty easy case. If you have an electric pump providing water for your home specifically, just for your home, then you're going to be eligible for this rebate. And that's, so you definitely want to hop on that. Another kind of clear-cut category is a home with medical equipment, or that's listed by the utilities on a medical baseline rate, or has notified the utility of a life-threatening illness or condition, qualifies regardless of income as well for the full $1 per watt hour rebate. If a home has had a grid alternative solar PV system installed on it, then it's also going to qualify regardless of income. So the person may have qualified for the grid alternatives rebate program previously, and due to their income levels, which was a requirement then. So the CPUC says we're not going to go back and look at the income, again. We're just going to base the prior qualification. So even if the homeowner's income is higher and would not qualify for grid alternatives or qualify for one of these programs like SASH or DAC-SASH now, if they had already qualified before, they essentially are going to be eligible for the full rebate here. So those three are ones that qualify regardless of income. It does look like the CPC is going to impose an income requirement for homes on California tribal lands. The exact income thresholds are pending. As I mentioned, there's a proposed decision that it's good. I think there's only about 4 or 5 days into that decision where there's a review and comment period. So the thresholds are pending. The current off-reservation limits, as stated in the decisions that are in effect right now, are 60% of median income for the area. Unfortunately, they're proposing a different income threshold for the reservations or California Indian lands. That's going to be based on California alternative rate requirements, which are associated with tribal assistance programs like TANF and other ones as well. So we can provide or direct you all to the proposed decision so you can see that. We're going to push back on that. If these proposed rates are going to lower, we don't want to see tribes being put at a lower threshold at a disadvantage versus others. So we're going to push hard back on that. And, I think it's going to be a reasonable request if that is the case. So, but it's either going to be 60% of the median income for the area, or it's going to be these care enrollment requirements. And so this is the current ones that are in the proposed decision based on care. So a household of 1 to 2 people is going to, have a max has to have an income below or equal to $34,480, and then that limit increases based on the household size. So if it gets changed to 60% of the median income for the area, then that may look different than this chart right here. But that's what they've currently proposed. So as I mentioned, that eligibility is uncertain. The home itself does not actually have to be owned by a tribal member. So non-tribal member homes, whether they're owned by a non-tribal member or a non-tribal member lives in them, they're also eligible. And you still need to be in a high fire threat district or subject to 2 or more PSPS outages. And as Sean mentioned, that's something where that may be changing over time. You may have not experienced any or have only experienced 1 so far. And the moment you hit 2, you are now eligible. Okay, Sean, do you want to add anything else on the residential side of things? I'm going to go back to, I didn't fully update some of these slides.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think depending on the tribe, and area, the well pumps and the medical equipment, I think the well pumps is very much going to be based on kind of your tribal water infrastructure and whether that's prevalent or not. And then medical equipment, I would say, this is an effort by utilities to support customers to get on a medical baseline rates. And there's a lot of effort, again, happening by the utilities to get it out there. So I think for tribal governments to also support this with SWEL to say, you might be able to, your residents might be able to save money on their bills just by this rate change, and then also be eligible for these home batteries. Each utility has a different list of eligible equipment. They're all about the same. But I do think we say who are the most vulnerable residents. It's customers that do rely on electricity for various medical equipment. We'd want to back up right away. So I think there's an opportunity there to get that information out to your residents, both in saving them money with a different rate schedule, but also becoming eligible. And yeah, I mean, I think that's that. I mean, we're certainly digging into the income eligibility requirements now and doing what we can statewide to make this as beneficial as possible to as many tribal residents as possible.
Yeah, since we're a bit over time, I'm gonna kind of try to wrap this up. You know, I mean, the details of how you can roll this out, we can certainly, they're going to be on a case by case basis. You know, this something can be, you know, on the residential side, you can have Swell do outreach directly to homeowners. Most, in all cases so far, we've gone through the tribal governments and received their support in getting out the information and worked with them on the applications themselves. So the tribes themselves have collected the tribal government staff have collected applications and forwarded them along to Swell. But you know, we're flexible. But just to kind of give you an idea of what, you know, what these types, at least on the residential side, you know, we have a $1 per watt hour rebate. Swell is kind of targeting this 2 Tesla Powerwall system. The approximate cost of that 2 Powerwall system is $26,000. The rebate for that size of system is $26,400. So, you know, clearly we're under the amount, and you can't get more money than the system costs. So, you know, somebody can't get $26,400 for a system that costs $26,000 and pocket the $400. All these projects with the tribes we worked with so far, Swell is fronting the you know, any deposit money up front, or not all in all cases, but you know, Swell is submitting the applications on behalf, and they are doing bridge financing to pay their folks to move forward with these projects and get them installed, and they're waiting to receive the money on the back end. So it's being set up in a way where tribes are not paying any money at any point during the process, if you know, unless they want to, or homeowners, and then the contract language itself too. The rebates may or may not require, the residential ones require a contract to be signed. The contracts have a clause in them that allows either party to cancel for any reason up to the point at which the battery is being driven to the house or the facility. So, you know, we're trying to make this as little risk as possible. I mean, really, essentially no risk to the tribes to proceed with this. You know, to get an application in, to ensure that they at least secured some of the money for a home or facility, and then from there, you know, if for some reason something changes, or you know, let's say they weren't able to, you know, there was not time to do site diligence, or something, you know, something comes up in terms of, you know, it looks like it's gonna, you know, there's some major upgrade that needs to occur that wasn't caught from the beginning, or whatever it is. You know, either party can kind of, you know, back away from it as needed. So, you know, it's risk-free from the tribe standpoint. So kind of here's what I was talking about, the tribal rebate initiatives, where, you know, tribes can work with any battery installer. You know, I've decided to work with Swell Energy and to roll this out for a statewide initiative. You know, we're working with San Pasqual, Rincon, and Paula, and I think you're kind of knee deep now with Yurok and pursuing at least the non-residential projects as well. You know, the tribal initiative features can be how you want them to be. You know, there could be a webinar posted for your tribal community members on this, or tribal staff or leadership, to explain this opportunity. The rebate application and collection of documentations is being handled by Swell, so they actually submit the application. An actual approved developer does need to submit the application through the portal, so you know, people can't submit them on their own, but it's a little more complicated, or a lot more complicated. And then, you know, no out-of-pocket cost and no risk in the contract itself of either party being able to back out. So, Sean, do you want to add any kind of additional thoughts or additional kind of guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I guess two things is we do recognize that for tribal residents, making these that are qualified for the no out-of-pocket costs, you know, making this process really easy for them, and also ensuring that there's no risk. So things like not moving forward prior to getting the rebate confirmed, and having the ability to kind of cancel up until the point we're installing a project is super important to us. And then also making sure that when we install a battery at a homeowner's residential house, that there's no chance of these batteries actually, you know, costing the customer any money over time. So we do a detailed analysis on every site to make sure that they're cost neutral, you know, in terms of energy savings, or they'll save money. And that's based on the charging and discharging of the battery with solar or without solar. we just want to make sure that there is a benefit long term as well, outside of just getting the equipment installed for backup purposes. And equally, we do those analysis a little bit more upfront on the commercial side. So we'll be creating a very detailed energy analysis on each one of the sites to show what those kind of long-term benefits are. And just on the payment side of things, so we're, as Josh mentioned, we're floating the rebate for residential, which means that there's no out-of-pocket cost. And then once that rebate does, or once the project does get completed, the rebate is assigned to Swell. So essentially, we're trusting with the security of having the rebate payments assigned to Swell that we're going to bring this project to completion. We'll do all the final rebate work, and then it's about a 6-month process from construction to actually getting paid. So that's the bridge financing that we talked about, which is just internally we're securing the funds to be able to handle that construction kind of delay of payment. And then on the commercial side, we have similar financing available where we'll 50% on commercial gets paid after completion, but then the rest of the rebate payment gets paid out over 5 years. And so that during that 5-year period, if Swell is providing the upfront capital for construction costs, we'll actually be the ones to receive that money over time. We can structure it in different ways for commercial projects also, where perhaps the tribal government wants to just finance the project and then receive those rebates. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We're here to help from the finance side, and if any governments do want to kind of participate in innovative financing programs, whether for residential or commercial, we're very open to that as well. To discuss some options.
Great, thanks, Sean. So since we are over, I'm going to encourage people to reach out to us separately to ask questions. I'm going to try to pull up so I go back to the slide with our contact information. We sent over our contact information in the email announcing this webinar as well. So you feel free to reach out to myself or Sean for additional questions. I mean, we're excited. We're trying, as I mentioned, this money. I don't know, Sean, do you have any statistics on where we stand with how much money's been spent? I mean, the equity project category got sucked up. That was like $20 or $40 million, right? And there was like another $150 million worth of applications that are that didn't get extended or waitlisted. So
yeah, like it's currently the wait list on the general equity budget is $250 million. So there's some efforts by some of our counterparts in the industry to actually transfer money to that category, which we don't. I'll publicly state we believe that this money should still stay within how allocated, so it can go toward projects that are in high fire zones and that are most at risk. Prior to looking at transferring money, there's a lot of money available in the equity resiliency budget, and we believe that we should see how that goes once they open the money up. Make that available, and if that money cannot be used because we're threading the needle of eligibility, then maybe over time we could transfer some of that money to equity projects. We are aware that for tribal projects, even the Chumash, for instance, that aren't eligible for equity resiliency, it would be great to get some of this money, additionally available to other projects as well. So, right now,
the main point being though that not only are there people putting in applications on equity resilience for projects, there's also the threat of money being removed,
yes.
Moved from the equity resilience budget to projects that have already been funded under the equity budget. So that could literally be a $150 million plus shift in funds, that could happen instantly. So we're kind of, we're indicating that this money could be gone by the end of summer. I mean, it could be a few months that this is used up, and I mean, hopefully it's used up because we are successful in working with tribes in deploying these projects, and the tribes are the ones that are actually using up all the budget. So that would be a good situation if that is the case. It would not be a good situation if the money gets used up by others and then tribes are interested and don't act quickly enough and find that they don't have money available to them to proceed with these projects. So
Yeah,
that's what we're hoping to avoid.
That's right, Josh. And just to add to that is, I think to the extent that we can spread the news about this to counterparts at various tribal governments that this is available now, would love to see, outside of the commercial business, purposes, personally would love to see tribes use this money and get these projects installed, first and foremost. And it's a lot of money, so to the extent we get everyone signed up as soon as possible, that would be great, just to be able to provide that. And we're here to help. So yeah, that's my closing comments.
Great. Shasta, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? I appreciate you joining us and sharing your perspective from working with us and the Apollo projects we've worked on.
Yeah, just that it's worth it to proceed, and anybody who has more interest and questions should reach out to the two of you for more information, and I strongly recommend that they do so.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks everybody for taking the time to join us here, and hopefully we'll hear back from many of you, and hopefully we'll get a lot of tribal projects installed out there. Tribes are going to get most of this rebate funding for tribal projects. That would just be a real huge win. So thank you very much, and take care.